Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. If you're following along, think of this as our Chapter 7 overview, where we'll be breaking down the fascinating and honestly often completely unseen psychological dynamics of families through the lens of object relations family counseling. If you've ever wondered why families repeat the exact same arguments for decades, or why the past seems to sit invisibly in the living room with you today, well, you're in the right place. We're going to make the invisible visible.
Take a look at this image. It's a 3-generation genogram of the Quest family. Notice all those lines and connections? The jagged edges that point out conflict or distress? Like the notes on alcohol problems? It's literally a visual map of a family's history. And this is exactly the kind of deep dive that family assessment requires. We're not just looking at who happens to be sitting in the room right now. We're actually looking at the ghosts of generations past and how they pull the strings on how a family interacts today.
So, here's our quick roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with the assessment landscape, trace the roots of object relations, explore the family garden concept, look at the counselor's role, cover some critiques, and finally wrap up with the Adlerian shift.
All right, let's jump straight into our first section, the assessment landscape and how we evaluate the whole system.
Assessing a family is absolutely not just a guessing game. As this quote points out, it requires an almost encyclopedic knowledge of clinical tools. We're talking about evaluating everything from everyday parenting conflicts to really severe child anxieties. Whether a family is dealing with divorce, custody evaluations, or a teen's depression, the field actually provides over 100 evidence-based instruments to map out what's really going on. Getting a grip on this landscape is the absolute bedrock of effective counseling.
Moving right along to Section 2, let's look at the roots of object relations and how it moved from the individual to the entire family system.
So, Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychology, right? Well, he never actually worked directly with families. His early drive psychology in the early 1900s was entirely focused on the individual's inner world. But as we moved into the mid-1900s, pioneers studying child development started looking at objects, which is just clinical jargon for the internal images we hold of our early caregivers. Then fast forward to the 1980s, and practitioners like Samuel Slip, along with David and Jill Scharf, finally built a bridge. They took those psychoanalytic concepts of attachment and integrated them directly into family counseling, a total game changer.
And this transition was absolutely vital. See, while early family therapy pioneers, like Salvador Minuchin, almost entirely dismissed the individual to focus purely on the system, object relations brought the individual's inner world right back to center stage. The whole goal here is taking the lost parts of the self and reintegrating them. Because think about it, if these repressed, hidden parts aren't integrated, they just get unconsciously projected onto other family members, and that causes endless cycles of dysfunction.
This brings us to Section 3, the family garden. Let's look at a living metaphor for all of this theory.
I absolutely love this quote because it brilliantly illustrates the model developed by David and Jill Scharf. They didn't look at a family as some broken machine that you just take a wrench to and fix. Instead, they saw it as an interconnected, growing garden. It is a literal horticultural commitment to growth over years and years. So fertilizing the ground is like building the family's shared holding capacity, and tending to the different plants is just like caring for each individual family member.
Let's break that down a bit more. In this emotional ecosystem, clean air and water equals social provisions for family health. The fences, those are the boundaries keeping the whole system safe from invasion. And the fertilized ground is that emotional holding capacity. But here is the most crucial takeaway. The counselors are not the gardeners, the family members are. Counselors simply act as outside consultants. They get called in when the real gardeners run into problems they just can't handle, and they help get that ecosystem back on track.
Okay, let's transition to Section 4 and look at the counselor's role in actually unlocking the unconscious.
Now, if you want to understand the counselor's job, you absolutely have to understand transference. Basically, this is when a family member unconsciously takes their past childhood relationships, all those deep early needs, fears, and internal images, and projects them onto the counselor, or even onto each other. It's literally the past repeating itself right there in the counseling room. The counselor's main job is to catch this happening and make that unconscious baggage completely conscious.
So how do they actually pull that off? Well, by creating what's called a holding space. The counselor essentially acts like a sponge, absorbing the family's intense projections and emotions to create a totally safe environment. By doing this, the counselor models the kind of secure childhood attachment the family might have missed out on. It teaches the partners and the kids how to finally be present for one another's deepest wounds without just running away or going on the attack.
To make this work, the counselor relies on a highly specific toolkit. First, they adopt a stance of optimal visibility.
meaning they show just enough of themselves to prove they're present, but otherwise, they stay a blank screen for the family's projections. They do some seriously deep active listening. They meticulously track emotional cues, and they help reintegrate those projected parts of the self. They don't rush in to fix a symptom. Instead, they patiently let the family's true dynamic reveal itself so they can develop real insight.
Now, you might be thinking psychoanalytic counselors just sit around in armchairs talking about the distant past all day. But no, not at all. Object relations counselors actually find immense power in the here and now. They track immediate, real-time reactions right there in the room. We're talking about a sudden dirty look between spouses, a harsh interruption, or a random flare of temper. Sure, the history happened decades ago, but the feelings about it are exploding right in front of them, and that gives the counselor the perfect key to unlock those deep unconscious wounds.
Let's move to Section 5. We need to talk about the critiques and limitations, basically the blind spots of this model.
As amazing as this approach is, it has some very real criticisms. Because it requires such a massive long-term commitment of both time and money to reach these psychological depths, it's often criticized for mostly serving white, upper, and middle-class families. It can be completely incompatible with lower-income clients who might desperately need immediate, practical problem-solving just to survive the week. On top of that, the model's Freudian roots definitely carry some historical gender biases. Its heavy reliance on early maternal attachment can sometimes unfairly place the blame squarely on the mother if a child's attachment fails, while completely ignoring larger systemic issues.
Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 6, the Adlerian shift, and how it offered a totally new perspective.
Enter Alfred Adler. Long before modern systems theory was even a thing, Adler was actually the very first psychiatrist of the modern era to do family counseling. Right after World War I, he was running these open-forum child guidance clinics over in Vienna. But here's the twist. Instead of hunting for hidden unconscious drives like Freud did, Adler completely shifted the focus to observable, systemic, and purposeful actions. He wanted to know the actual goals behind our behavior.
And that brings us to a really fascinating cliffhanger. If object relation spends years mapping out the unconscious wounds of the past to heal the family garden, how does shifting our focus entirely to the present purpose and future goals of our behavior completely rewrite the rules of family counseling? How does Adler's approach change the way we understand the families we live in today? I want you to keep that question in mind as you reflect on the unseen roots in your own family tree. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.